All right. Thank you everyone for joining us. Today we have Evan Bobrow from Rathaus Press, and they'll be sharing with us some information about risograph file prep. Got their links in the chat if you want to check out their website and stuff like that. But yeah, Evan, take it away.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Hello, I'm Evan. Um, I I run Rathaus Press, which is a independent risograph press here in Rochester, New York. Actually, hold on. I have a little information about myself here. I live in Rochester, New York. I got involved in small press um, in around 2015, 2016. And I started doing Riso printing in 2020, and I started the press itself in 2021. Right now, I do commission printing for people, and then I also develop programming and run different programs for people in Rochester, primarily the LGBT community. Um, yes, and I use they, them pronouns as well. Um, I had this for another thing. You don't have to be this specific, but would love just something in the chat to be like hello and maybe what type of thing you're interested in, just so I can make sure to mention it. Mhm. But yeah, this presentation is a little cannibalized from a an in-person workshop I did about something else. Mhm. Mhm. Put this up for a second. Um, but yeah, I can just also start talking about Riso. Feel free to mention some things in the chat as you go. Oh, and hello, Hannah. Um, nice. And I guess I know Julie already, so I guess I know what perhaps Julie's interest is. Uh but yeah, great. It's nice to see. Yeah, you don't have to do a fun fact. That was for I did a presentation um in person in Philadelphia about something else. But which was much longer. But yes, a lot of Western New York representation. We'd love to see that. But yeah, so this presentation's on Riso file setup. I'm going to start with just talking about some like tips and things like that, and then I'm going to do a little bit of a demo, and also happy to answer questions sort of as they come up. Feel free to put them in the chat. I have the chat open, and I have said that if I don't see a message in the chat, that someone will read it out to me. So that'd be great. So going into sort of talking about Riso a little bit, this is just sort of the general, just did like a Google search of risograph printing. This is sort of what comes up. A lot of vibrant colors, a lot of illustrative work, things like that. Here are some of the qualities that I think of when I think of Riso. There's kind of that unique texture that people go to, that those like Instagram filters like to recreate, that the inks are physically layered on top of each other. The color's very vibrant and also like sort of a frustratingly imperfect nature to it sometimes. There is a level of embracing those quirks and also sometimes uh, getting a little frustrated about it. But it's all part of the process. And then, a question mark of there's always a mystery. I don't know. Um, Sort of open to other people's thoughts about this. Um, but kind of going through a couple different types of images and files. Um, so something like this is very easy to produce in terms of file prep because it is a one color image. All this would need to be is just grayscale. And then you would just send it to the printer. It would interpret that grayscale image as whatever color was in the printer. Um, and you wouldn't really have to do a lot else to it other than just laying it out on the page so that it was like economical. Like for something like this, that's a zine, you would want to print 4 pages for an 11 by 17. So yeah, so there's no registration issues because it's one color and because this is high contrast, it's very legible. Um, you're able to print a black and white design in any color you want, which can add a little bit of visual interest to it and also can kind of unify things. Um, Something like this is an illustration by Kelly Jin. I can put people's like the her name is very small on here, but I can put people's social media and stuff in the chat after and also plug it at the end. But so something like this is a two-color illustration, but the colors don't really interact with each other at all. They are just spot colors that are not overlapping. So for this, this would be the file that you would send for the teal, and this is the file you would send for the scarlet. As you can see, as I like flip back and forth between them, nothing really is touching each other in that way. Um, this was a this is my the cover of my Gay Thoughts journal. Um, you can see here that it's still just sort of flat colors. There's no sort of gradient or anything, but you can use these three colors to layer on top of each other and create different, more of like a rainbow of colors. Once you have three colors, you get a much bigger range. Um, so you can also do sort of designs like this that use more subtle gradients. This design is by Molly Magnell, who's an artist in New York. Um, this on the left was her original design on the computer. On the right is a scan of the Riso print that I did for her. It's a little bit higher contrast in real life, but it's hard to photograph sometimes Riso prints. And in this example, she made this design with risograph printing in mind. So you can see in her file prep images, there's not really like any weird like half grays places. Like there's a lot of very intentional choices that are being made. Um, versus something like this, which is a photograph. If you wanted to print a photograph, this is an example of this photograph that I had printed. You would need to separate this with software. Obviously, you can't just intuitively do this. You need to have some backup from something like Photoshop or third-party software. Um, you can see here that these are the different um, color separations of this one. The black is pretty much what you would expect, and then the seafoam and the paprika look a little crazy. Because this image has so much seafoam in it, you can see that there's a very heavy like seafoam focus in this. Um, so talking a little bit about what the steps are from getting a file to print. There are sort of three main questions that you would ask. The first one is who's doing it? Like, are you doing it yourself? Do you have access to a Riso at your school or your workplace? Or are you sending it to somebody like a professional to print it? Or are you having like your friend print it somewhere? What type of image is it? So kind of going back to like this stuff, like what of these are you working with? And then what tools do you have access to? So kind of going to the first one of who's doing the printing. If it's you, what kind of machine are you using? There's a lot of different types of risograph printers from all different times. Riso has existed for a while, although it has been really like kind of exploding in the past 5 years or so. But there's a lot of machines that are from much longer ago that maybe don't connect to the computer or can't print tabloid size paper. That's not as much a time thing. That's more of a just a fact. There's a lot of modern machines also, depending on your model, won't print tabloid size paper. They might only print legal size paper. Um, does it have one drum or two drums? That's another important question in terms of how you're setting up your file, whether you're sending it to the printer twice or if you're printing it kind of all in one go. And if it's somebody else, what are they asking you for in terms of your file? What do they want? And what are their expectations for what you are going to do? Um, and if someone else is doing the printing for you, you would want to start by asking them what they are looking for in that. Um, a lot of people are going to want a lot of different things. Some people want to do all the setup themselves. Some people want a lot more setup. Some of this is going to be a question of cost. Most places will set stuff up for you, but it just is going to cost extra because it's more of their time that they're taking. Um, this is sort of sometimes how people feel when they are confronted with Riso terminology. And this is my beautiful representation of that experience. Um, what's it can be very overwhelming to get, thank you, Laura. Yeah, it can be very overwhelming to hear all of these terms thrown around at you that you don't know. Uh, there's a lot kind of going into things behind the scenes, a lot of more micro adjustments for people who are doing Riso all the time. That can definitely be a factor. I'm definitely guilty of this, of sort of divulging into jargon and very specific things, kind of hyper specific stuff that like no one else is going to notice except for me. Um, the takeaway for this is that you don't really need to worry about most of these things. Um, there is definitely a level of the more you get involved in Riso printing, to kind of dive into some of these intricacies. Um, but to start, you don't necessarily need to do that. And also, it's totally fine to be asking the people who are doing the printing for you or who are like showing you the printer, or people online for help if you don't have access to any of those things. It's totally fine to just ask them what to do in terms of like practical steps. Um, so next question of what type of image is this? Um, Kind of the main different types of things would be something monochromatic, like text or line work only, sort of like that first example of that zine I showed. An illustration that either you might have done by hand, you might have done it in digitally in like Photoshop or Procreate or something, but you didn't necessarily plan to print it with Riso. An illustration you made with Riso in mind, and then a photograph. So for monochromatic text or line work, you don't really need to do anything, as long as it's in black and white already. You just need to make sure it's the right size, place it on the page where you want it to be. If that's sometimes if that's not even important, you can kind of just send the picture, size it in the printing driver, and just kind of go from there. You might want to up the contrast a little bit just because kind of I'm gonna turn into the person talking to the math woman, but there's a thing in Riso called linearity, where uh, the way that Riso is going to represent the tones that you send it are not um, true to what you're going to see on the computer. So, in practical terms, what that usually means is that you need to up the contrast a little bit so that you can see the differences in tones that Riso might flatten out a little. Um, for a real regular illustration, like I said, it could be something that you did on by hand. It could be done digitally, but maybe there's not a lot of layer separation between the colors. Depending on complexity, this might be easier to process like a photo instead of trying to do it like an illustration. There are other ways you could also reverse engineer it to work, but most likely the easiest thing to do would be to process it like a photo. One thing that I like to do in these situations, if there is line work, is that I'll process it like a photo and then I'll select just the lines, because usually the lines themselves are maybe on a different layer or they're like black and it's easy to select them. Um, and then I'll move the lines over and put that on their own layer and then do the color separation sort of separately. For a Riso illustration, if you know from the beginning that you're going to be printing Riso, you can plan your file accordingly. That'll make it a lot easier for either you or whoever's doing your file setup to print it. So I'm going to go over some tips. This kind of goes along with what I just said about the line art thing, but using only one color for line work and text. Really what this means is that you don't want to layer two different colors on top of each other to get like a darker color or a third color and use that for your text, unless maybe the text is really big or the lines are really big. Because what's going to happen is Riso's registration is not perfect. So you are going to get sort of this jittering around and it's going to look like you're looking through like 3D glasses or something, which makes text hard to read and it makes lines just sort of look bad. Um, you want to keep your different colors on different layers. That's, I feel like, kind of self-explanatory. With Riso, you're sending one color at a time to the printer, so you're not really getting that. Like you need to be able to separate out what those colors are. Um, Working in opacities of one color, not 100%. opaque tints or shades. What that means is, I mean, basically sort of what it sounds like if you're planning to do some things that are like a dark blue and some things that are a lighter blue, but you're printing it in all one blue ink, you don't want to use like an opaque gray to show that midtone. You would want to use like a 50% opacity up black instead, or of that blue instead. Um, so going along with that, if it's possible, you want to keep different opacities of the same color on different layers, and also make it easy for yourself to make your file grayscale later. You can do that in a couple different ways, which I'll show you. And then also just using groups for different layers of the same color. That is just sort of a basic like file prep thing. I'm definitely, guilty of making a Photoshop file and everything is just like layer one, layer two, layer three, and it's just sort of everywhere. But especially if you're sending it to somebody else, it's very helpful to clean all that up and name all the layers so that they're not confused. And then for the question about what do you have access to, there's lots of different designing softwares, Photoshop, Illustrator, Clip Studio, Procreate, other things. And then in terms of file prep software, Photoshop again, InDesign, and then Spectralite are kind of the main things that I use typically. Um, Spectralite is a free program that we're going to look at today, and it's Mac only, unfortunately. Uh, but you can accomplish all the same things in it in Photoshop if you have access to that. And there are also some online alternatives to it. I haven't had a lot of success with that, but yeah, there are other ways you can accomplish the same thing in Photoshop or in like an online version of Photoshop. And then does anyone have any questions? I know I kind of sped through that. I feel like I also kind of dumped a lot of information very quickly, but I wanted to kind of mostly focus on demo-y type time of like walking through the actual process just because I thought that would be more helpful. Um, but I'll give you guys, I'm going to stop the share and pull up other things in case anyone has any questions. Okay, so Hannah asks, the colors you mentioned, do you pick the colors when you make the design or when you are printing, if that makes sense? That's a good question. It's kind of both. You can change the colors to whatever you want. Once you're printing, the file would be the same. Once it's in grayscale, you could change your mind and think you're going to print something in blue and then say, oh, actually, I think it would look better in like a purple. And then you could just send the same file and print it in purple. Um, you're really just deciding what layers are going to go to like the same color, if that makes sense. Like you can think about it more in terms of like a foreground, middle, background, or like a shadows, mid-tones type thing. Um, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's sort of the an overview of that. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Does anyone else have any questions? Should I put my phone in do not disturb? Sorry. Um, cool. Well, I'm just gonna open a file really quickly. Just one sec. I was trying to open all this at the beginning and then the screen sharing got really angry and I ended up kind of having to not do that. Um, okay. That, and I'm just gonna pull up one other one. Like, how's everybody doing? Oh, I already have it. Never mind. Okay. So now we're gonna share Photoshop. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yep, we can see that.
Okay, great. Um, so this is actually what I was working on just today. Um, so very hot off the press. But first, before I kind of go through all the way, I'm going to show you a little bit of like what my workflow would look like in these types of situations. So this image was the original mock-up that I got from the person who designed this, in terms of Lillian Melker. The actual print isn't going to look anything like this. But you can see that each of these are separated into a different layer. That's just the background. So this paprika is the sort of leaves behind the elk. This brown is the body, and this teal is the line work. And you can see, well, I have some stuff turned off. If I turn everything on here, you can see this obviously is all in grayscale. I can toggle each of these off so you can see these were these would be the files that we're actually sending to the printer. And with something like this, gonna change 1 second. I'm just gonna make it look like it's actually looks really quickly. So you can see that I had all these different things going on. To have like the press file and then like the actual sort of print mockup. So you can see this ended up looking totally different than what she sent originally. Some of that can happen just because making some decisions about what is being printed versus how it might look on the computer. Once you've been printing for a little while, you can kind of see something and know immediately, like, oh, that's probably not going to work. Like, let's try to do it a different way. Um, so in this, you can see that I've sort of broken out these into different sort of sub layers. And then these groups have the whole thing in here. And I have these different color overlays so I can quickly switch it from black and white to the color mockup. And then actually I do have a final of this. See myself. Looks like this. Sometimes there's a lot of different like sort of trial and error with that. I don't know how obvious like some of these differences are going to look on the screen, but you can see like this one's a little lighter, like this one was like too dark. We were kind of playing around with trying to get some definition in the line work and still kind of preserve the look of the image. So this is the kind of thing that I would work back and forth when with an artist about to kind of figure out exactly what it would look like. This is sort of one example of how file prep can go, where she's delivering me um, something like this, where everything is separated into different layers, and she's given me kind of some guidelines of what percentages she wants things to be. Um, and then I'm going ahead and actually doing the file prep. So that's different than some other situations. So for that, it's a little bit more about like what is the best practice of like what to give somebody. I honestly prefer to do it this way, to have someone give me something like this that's broken into layers versus them do everything themselves unless I know that they've printed before. That's mostly just because everybody kind of has different ways they like to do things, and there is also a level of like wanting to be sure that you're not going to have to change things later. Um, if somebody else is preparing it for you, just because they might not know your workflow and you might need to change it. Um, so I'm just going to stop this share really quick and then start it again. And so something like this is how that then manifests as sort of a press file. Once I bring this into InDesign so I can put crop marks on it and like print more than one thing on a page. For these, I was printing something else with them. So you can kind of see this is just that teal layer. This is the orange, and this is the back of the card. So this is the where the logo is, and then this is the text in the brown. And then that all comes together in a sheet like this. So this is also part of why I prefer to do some of the setup for people, just because I know I'm going to set up a sheet like this that maybe they don't know the way that I personally like to do it, just because that's a preference and it's different for everybody. Um, I was like, oh, I have a message. I was like, it's neat. Julie says it's neat, and that should be preserved in the recording. Um, yeah, so that's a little bit about my like what it just sort of looks like for someone who is doing this more in like a commission space, what like some of my files might look like. Um, and then let me stop this. That's just the same presentation I showed you. Um, but we can go ahead and if we take, sorry, just trying to grab a file quickly. I guess, does anyone also have any questions about that just while I'm pulling up other things? Just give people a minute. All right, cool. Well, I'm just gonna go ahead and open or you have a million, yeah, Laura will have a million questions in a month because she will be much closer to me physically. Um, so I'm just gonna go ahead and share Photoshop again. This was another kind of example. This also looks pretty different in real life than it does in this file. But this was another example of that. You can kind of see some of these other layers. This one has a lot more different opacities of things. It's a little more complicated. So the reason why I said it's helpful to break down different levels of opacity into different layers is because if you know everything wants to be one tone and you realize later that that tone could be accomplished with a slightly different opacity, then it's easier to get that if you have it in a separate layer already, because then you can just change the opacity here instead of like messing with the actual image. Um, so I was just gonna make a new file, like a still letter size piece of paper. Okay, so this is going to be a very, I don't have a tablet with me, I just have a mouse. So it's gonna be a pretty ugly uh illustration. But if I were kind of planning from the ground up to make a Riso illustration, the first thing I would do, obviously, is make a second layer so that you're not drawing right on the background. Um, but I typically what I do is I do everything in black and then I add a color overlay over it or a clipping mask. Um, if you don't use a lot of Photoshop or anything, that's fine. You go back to you don't worry about that, I guess. But this is just sort of how I do it. I'll sort of walk through what those things mean. So don't worry if you maybe don't know, that's totally fine. But let's say I'm making this beautiful illustration of a dinosaur. This is its big mouth. How beautiful. Its little arms. I've made him too far away. He's very skinny. What a beautiful creature. Glad this is being recorded. He's so beautiful. I'll give him some teeth. Okay. I don't know why I chose to do this in Photoshop instead of like Illustrator. That would have maybe been less obvious that I'm not holding that I don't have a tablet with me and can't really actually draw anything. But yeah, here we are. Here's our beautiful illustration. So all this line work would be on one layer. And then let's say I know that I want to make, yeah, that's not what I want. There we go. I'm just adding. I want to make let's say I want to make the dinosaur light lime. I'm gonna grab that hex code, and I typically do this in the layer styles panel. I go in here to color overlay. The last one I was doing was orange. I just click this and I put the hex code that I want in there. You could also do this the other way around, where if you were drawing in the color you wanted, and then you did a color overlay and made it black later. Um, but this is sort of what I was working with. But it doesn't have to be beautiful. It just has to kind of get the point across. But let's say that then you want to add like some dots or something. Like you want to give him some dots in another color. Or let's give him stripes. That'll be easier for me to create. Okay. So let's say, so for this, I'll do it the other way, um, just for the sake of it. Um, this I'm putting the stripes are paprika, and then I'm going in here and I'll make the color overlay black that I'll turn on later. So yeah, now we have this creature. If I wanted to print this and have it look like this, I would need to knock out these orange stripes. If I didn't, sort of a simulation of what that would look like is if I put this layer on multiply, you can see that, like if I turn that off, it looks more orange. Here you can see that the green, like versus normal on multiply, the green is kind of changing the color of the orange. Just because Riso inks are physical inks and they're layering on top of each other doesn't mean they're 100% opaque. Most of them are not super opaque at all. It really depends on the ink you're using. That's another thing that you would kind of either get a feel for, or the person who is printing for you would tell you. For example, some inks like sunflower or cornflower um, are very opaque. They can they do start to cover up the things in front of them. So if, for example, you were printing sunflower on top of blue, where the sunflower and the blue are overlapping would actually look lighter instead of darker, because the sunflower would be kind of picking up some of that. Oh, thank you. I didn't see the appreciation for my dinosaur. Thank you. Yeah, it's my magnum opus. But yeah, so that's one thing that I've found that people kind of have find confusing, especially when I'm doing more physical analog workshops, that they don't totally grasp that you need to then knock this out. So the way I would do that here, there's lots of different ways you could do this. Um, why is it not? Hello? Like, like 1 second. Let me just learn how to use Photoshop very quickly. I mean, I guess I can just select these, but I'm, I don't know why it wasn't just letting me select everything. What's happening? It's being so mean to me. Not in front of my friends. Okay. So I would then um in order to get a little thing called trapping. Trapping is just when you print there's like a little bit of overlap between where your colors are so that if it's misregistered, there's no gap between them. Um, so I'm just going to contract this selection by 2 pixels, um, make a new layer, and then sorry, it's hard to all the zoom controls are covering up all of my tools. Um, so now there's another layer there, so you can see that the orange is not being covered up. You probably couldn't have heard that, but there was a car that sounded like a jet plane. It was so loud. Um, and so then when you're not printing the orange or the black, like the layers look kind of silly. Um, and you would also want to do the same thing with a little bit of trapping um, on the green layer as well. But it's okay. We can, well, we might as well. So we're gonna expand this instead. Actually, I can expand it a little more than that. So I can actually see that's happening. I'm just gonna actually, this is very silly that I'm about to do it this way, but I was like, I'm just gonna make a big, I'm really showing that I don't do illustration ever. But yeah, now you have a little bit of trapping around that. So, and then if you wanted to do, say you were doing like shading, you might want to do that in like, let's say we got, this is our beautiful shading. It's the smallest tool in the world. Okay. So we could add, similarly, we're going to go in and let's pick a different color. We can do blue. And then we would put this on multiply to get a better understanding of it. We'd want it to be up here also. And then kind of lower the opacity to be what you wanted it to be. Going and painting that a little bit. So if you wanted this to then, you change your mind, you only want to print, because this would now be a 4-color print, which is a little indulgent for this creature. Not that he doesn't deserve it, but Um, cost wise, it might be a little silly, but five more colors. That is another thing actually in terms of Riso that is good to keep in mind. You don't really want to go above four colors, probably. You could do more if it's like a very specific situation. I mean, you can do as many as you want. Like when I've done like swatch cards and stuff like that, I'm printing like 18 colors on one piece of paper. But the registration is just gets very difficult the more colors that you add. So that's just something that you would want to keep in mind. Hello, new person. I like that this is what you're entering to. Um, but yeah, so basically what you want to do is just keep everything sort of separate and with those different layers in mind. One thing that I feel like would actually be more helpful to to see. Um, Let me just quickly grab this back. Oh, there. How does adding more colors impact the print time, assuming the cut files are prepared correctly? So every color in the Riso you're printing separately. If you have a two drum machine, you're because the Riso prints one color at a time. It prints with a stencil. I'm actually going to grab this is part of why I came here. I'm going to grab one myself. So here he is. Here's a Riso drum. I feel like it looks bigger on this camera than it is in real life, but these are the drums that go into the machine. The scarlets. So you could see it sort of looks like a big canister. This tube in the front is the ink, and this entire thing moves a little bit farther. So I can put this on the table. This whole thing spins as it's going through the machine. And this piece of paper here, this a new one of these gets put on for every time you print, every time you print a new design. The design is getting burned onto this, which is called a master. And then this is what's the ink is getting pushed through this. It's hard to see on the camera, but if you look, maybe I can get it. This is also like not necessarily a great example because the line work is kind of fine. But basically, there are little tiny little holes on here that the ink is allowed to get through. Sort of similar to screen printing. A lot of people describe Riso as a cross between screen printing and photocopying because it is a stencil-based process, but you're doing it through a physical machine in a more automated way. But so to answer your question about printing time, um, if you're using a one drum machine, printing four colors is going to quadruple the amount of time that you're taking if you versus doing one color because you're basically printing it four times. Um, if you have a two drum machine, it'll double the time because you'll be printing. You'll do it in two passes because you can do two colors at a time. A little more than double it, I guess, because you'd be kind of considering for registration between the two. Um, and Yeah, so adding more colors does add substantially more time if you are doing if you're outsourcing your Riso printing, if you're prepping a file with the intention of someone else printing it for you, that will also definitely impact things. You will, yeah, basically the main difference in cost is going to be how many colors you're doing because once you set up the one color, the cost between if you were doing a two color print, doing a um so Julie asked, registration means getting the ink to show up where you want to, right? Yes. So registration is just how closely aligned things are. Let me see if I can find a really badly registered thing so I can show you the difference. That shouldn't be very difficult. Yeah. So from these proofs I was doing earlier, I put these little marks on here, these little circles. I guess I should stop sharing so this is bigger. Um, these little circles here so you can see how far apart they are versus once you move them, how it's making this one darker color in the middle because they're on top of each other. You can move the drums in the machine once you've started printing. There are little arrow keys on the machine that let you move them around. You can't move them around like an insane amount, but I think up to like a half inch in every direction. So which is pretty significant. It might be a quarter of an inch. Um, and then you can also switch that to a finer adjustment. So you can do it, it's by a tenth of a millimeter. So you can kind of like dial in where you want things to be. But this is pretty well registered actually. Like you can see on here and like kind of in this area, um, that's pretty good because this is actually there's a third color here. There's a teal here, and you can't really tell that this is teal, which is the intention. It's to make it look darker, but not necessarily um double up the lines or anything. So that's sort of an example of registration. Um, bring back my boy. Does anyone else have any questions about things like that? Like, and I'm also like put my information in at the beginning in terms of my like Instagram and website. You can also email me. I'll just put that in here now. Yes, thank you. This is my email. Feel free to reach out to me if you have further questions. I'm on I'm in the Discord server. My Discord handle. Why can't I like learning to type for the first time? This is my Discord handle. So feel free to message me about things. I am pretty in production mode at the moment, so if I don't get back to you immediately, that is why. Uh, but feel free to reach out to me anyway, and I love to stop what I'm doing to help somebody else for no reason. Um, but I guess I'm gonna talk a little bit about sort of that overlapping color thing. So when we were looking at Molly's, the house print, that one I don't have that file open, partially because it's in channels, which is a little bit different. I think that that's like a little harder to wrap your brain around. So I don't really want to get into that too much, but that's just a different way of doing this. Um, but yeah, let's say that we wanted to add kind of like a highlight. We want to make this dinosaur sort of two different colors. Actually, we can just duplicate this layer. We're gonna put it on multiply. And we're gonna change this color overlay. Sorry, forgot to get this first. It's very annoying that it won't let you pick one of your swatches from the color overlay. I don't know why it does that. Okay, so it looks the same. So if we turn this opacity down, you can kind of see the color differences. I feel like my Photoshop is acting strange, but of course it is when I need it most. Um, but yeah, if I go in here and kind of let me turn this down, kind of erase out some areas. Um, Leaf says Adobe has a guy whose job it is to make your programs not work when you're under pressure. That's very true. Um, yeah, it's being like, oh, don't you want to be embarrassed in front of in front of people. Um, but yeah, I'm kind of now I'm making some other things where I know that the sea foam is going to be, let's say I know I want to do another like kind of darker pass. I could um, kind of erase out even more. I say, I'm just going to put like this on like a more random blue. It's not true to what's happening, but yeah, so now we've got kind of like a gradient dinosaur, but versus if we had done this all on one layer or just sort of like instead of thinking about it in terms of the different colors, maybe addressing that a little bit differently. Um, this way, um, you're getting a little bit more of control over what the colors are going to be. Put that blue over the orange. Um, so in terms of something like this, and now we also could say, no, I'm gonna grab the right blue. And see, I've done the thing that I said not to do, which is that I don't know what any of these layers do, or what any of them are. Let's go through and name them. So this is the stripe knockout. This is hard shadow. This is blue. This is lines. Is that not the knockout? Oh no, this is the stripes. And this is the stripe. No. This is the seafood. Okay. So now, once again, now we have like a million colors. So I would probably go in and I would probably make this line art blue as well. Um, go in here to the color overlay. You could also at the end, once these are all grouped together, you could just put the color overlay over everything in the group. So if I group this, and I know this is going to be my blue, I could double click here and do that color overlay there instead, which is a little bit easier in a lot of ways. But I wasn't necessarily sure which things were going to be which color, so that's why I was doing it the other way. And then now, like, these effects don't really do anything because you're applying a general color overlay over everything. Um, but now that I've done this, you can see that this is kind of, it looks like it's a little too much. Like I can turn this down a little bit. This hard shadow isn't dark enough. I can turn that up a little. I don't know why I'm trying to make this like better necessarily. I don't think that's really the point. But you can see that you have a little bit more control over what these different layers look like, these stripes. Um, here, so notice that we're not knocking out where the blue is because you would want that to be layered on top. So you're just knocking out where the over the seafoam because you and the seafoam and the lime because you don't want it to come through in those places. So I'm gonna make a paprika layer. I might make some other. That's our mask, and then seafoam. And lime. This is kind of our base color. And yeah, let's say we wanted to add in for paprika. Want to make a new layer. We want to make like the pupils orange. So we could go in here. Do that. Um, yeah, so now he's really coming together. You also, when you're using kind of in terms of just thinking about color theory, like we could be bringing some of this orange into the shadow. Um, if instead we wanted that in here and we put a color overlay over this instead, over the whole thing. Like you might not want necessarily both of those things, but if you started to like carve away at that, you could get kind of some interesting color things going on. Where it's a little darker. But basically, I just want to have more moving parts everywhere in terms of like file setup. So what I would do here, like now that I have everything set up, um, usually I will just go through. I can copy the layer style. And I'm now it just looks black. But as we take each of these away, like if we just look at this, or we just look at this, you can see there are some differences to each of them. So what we could do here, well, now that we're at this stage, depending on what access to what things you have, you could just save different either like PNGs or PDFs of each of these images separately, or you could bring them into another program like InDesign, which I can show quickly. Um, so if I stop sharing really quick. And then start sharing again. And then if you wanted to maybe you want to do a bunch of these on different places, maybe you have different sizes in mind. What I would typically do is put it on something like this. You can then some people don't realize this about InDesign. You can go into object layer styles and change what layers are visible. So this one already only has one visible, but I could go ahead and like duplicate this and then make that go away and so on to make sure they're perfectly registered with each other. And then I could also put on some some crop marks. Typically, I would have done this at the beginning so that I was copying them over every time. But something like this, that would be, oh, you're probably not able to see that, on every page so that you had something to align it to. So that's what like these are right here. So that's a little bit about kind of that workflow. The main thing to keep in mind, there's not really like a right way to do this. That was more of just to show you sort of some of those principles of knocking things out, having different opacities, being able to convert everything to black kind of quickly, things like that. Those are all just sort of general principles. You don't necessarily have to do that in Photoshop and InDesign. You could do it in basically anything else. The other thing I want to show you guys though is Spectralite, which is a specific Riso program. So I know I said mentioned that we were going to talk about photos a little bit. So this is sort of a main go-to for doing photos. It is a software that is for free. It is put out by an enemy, and I'm like literally doing the thing from Finding Nemo where I can't pronounce that word. I'm not going to keep trying, actually. I just want like a picture. Let me, I go into, this is a very funny like name files. Where's presentations? Uh, go in here. Oh, I guess you guys can't see what I'm doing actually. I just realized. So I have this photo of this astronaut. Um, and you can bring that into Spectralite. You can bring in any sort of image source. Oh, thank you for dropping the link to Spectralite. I will bring that. I'll bring the website up also so you can see it in a minute. But basically you can bring an image into here. You can load in different palettes. You can load in like what inks you have access to, and then you can create palettes out of those inks. So even if you don't necessarily have your own Riso uh, studio, you could, if you know you're going to be printing with a certain person and you know they have those colors, you can load those in. So these are all of the different Riso colors that exist. There are actually more than this. There are also other additional custom inks that have been made, but these are kind of the main ones. You can also download Adobe swatches, Procreate palettes. You can, yeah, you can load specific things. Um, so these are the inks that I have, so I have them loaded in here. And then these are some different palettes that I've worked with. Um, Looking at that photo specifically, there's obviously a lot of orange. Uh, there's kind of, I'm like trying to think. I'm like, what would I separate this into? There's orange, there's kind of like a lightish blue. There's black. Um, so let's see. Let's make a palette together. I can hit new palette. This is a little, it's kind of counterintuitive sometimes, especially if you're changing the palette. Like you would think you could change that up here, but you actually click off of this and then change that. So I know for sure I'm going to do orange and black. I kind of want to do orange, black, and teal. I want to see what that's going to look like. So I'm going to save that. And now that's the palette I have selected. And you hit this button, this Risofy button, and it's going to think for a little bit. And then it's going to break it out into different separations. Um, so this is me turning them on and off and on. So you can see here, it's being pretty heavy-handed with the orange. And then there's a little blue in the background, and then there's some black. And this is not like necessarily a perfect tool. I can actually go ahead and export this. I'm going to export it to a PSD file. Um, just to show you a little bit. quickly. Um, Stop sharing so I can pull up a different thing. I'm just going to show you this very fast because I know we're kind of creeping up towards 8:30. This is obviously a very vast subject. Um, it's hard to like really cover in any like short amount of time. Um, but one second. So this is that same image now open in Photoshop. So they have changed what this looks like, actually. I think maybe they've changed the export settings. Before it would only open in channels. So this is new information to me as well. Um, this me finding this out right now as well. How do I? So these are kind of going in with the different curves and everything, but it's showing here you can see the original versus the preview of this. Um, and if I, let's say, turn off the black and the teal, like you can see how much orange this is. Like that's too much orange, especially in the background. Um, like that's going to pick up other colors when you're printing, where like that because the ink is wet, it'll get like stuck to it, and it's also just too much ink because Riso ink never really dries. Um, so like if I were to go in here, I would take out like looking at this, there's not actually that much orange in this background. It's kind of overcompensating. Like you could accomplish that same thing with just more black. There also looks like there's kind of too much orange, like in his face and like her face especially. Um, in general, kind of like everywhere except, I mean, and the suit also doesn't necessarily need to be 100% orange. Like that's, like obviously in the original picture, it's very orange, but you're also getting some of this like shading, and you don't necessarily need to be printing black over 100% orange like that. It's just too much ink and you don't really need it. Um, so like if I turn this off, um, and was kind of looking in here, there would be ways to kind of get the black to compensate for this. But that's kind of a bigger conversation about photographs, which is sort of a whole other thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, this was kind of just sort of a quick overview of some of the ways that I do resource separation. Again, it's kind of hard to cover everything that there would be to cover in sort of a short span of time like this, but that gives you, I feel like, a little bit of perspective about what um, people are expecting or what they're going to do with files later, and some of the things you can keep in mind when you're doing that. Oh, I wanted to pull up actually, and then I have my resources. Let me just share this again. So here are some more resources. If you're more interested in photos, this is a really great resource called There There Now. The press is called There There Now. The actual project is called Color Shift. Um, they do a lot of color profiling. They are an open source color profile um, sort of project. It's run by Travis Schaefer, who is at the University of Missouri, and he does a lot of really great work with color separation. He's sort of like the premier guy in terms of photography. I'm like trying to look, and I don't think it'll really read on camera. I was like, I can show you his book, but it's better to just look at his social media and website. But this is really cool because you can, if you run your own Riso shop, you can print with the inks that you have that he might not have and send that to him, send out a kind of sheet to him, and he will make a color profile sort of in association with that, which is very interesting and cool because color profiling software is very expensive. So It's very cool that he's making it accessible in this way. And you can download some of them from the website. There's a lot more of them in the Google Drive, which is available from the link tree that we've just linked in the chat. If you are more interested in color separation and specifically photography, this is like it's like an 8 or 12 week long class. Like that's like how long you could really spend on some of these things. It's $100 to $400 in terms of like I believe the $100 is you just get access to like all the resources and like asynchronous recordings, and 400 is like a live class. But considering how much information you get, like obviously $400 is a lot, but it's also like a phenomenal amount of information. It feels like a college level course. Um, some other resources. There's a Reddit thread where you can ask questions. If anyone wants to be a mod of the risograph Reddit, we kind of recently took back the Riso Reddit, and are still looking for more moderators to sort of fill that out. So feel free to message me about that too if you're interested in that. Um, this is sort of the main website that has kind of general information about Riso. Uh, it is called Stencil Wiki. It is the wiki for Riso. And I don't have a slide for Spectralight, but I'm going to just pull up the website. Oh yes, and thank you, Laura, for the Discord server. Um, I didn't put it in the slides because the link expires so quickly that I figured it would be confusing for the recording. The Discord server is probably the best place to ask questions. Um, there's a real wealth of information there. It's a real range of people who are just learning Riso to like, oh, it's set to never expire. That's cool. Um, I didn't realize that there was one that didn't expire. Um, but yeah, there's a real range of people who are just learning Riso to like really like industry standard professionals. Robert Baxter is a really great resource. He is sort of like a traveling Riso technician person. He had knows a ton. Like Travis is in that Discord. People you can ask him questions. Um, there are like whole channels for like separation and everything. I recommend kind of just searching around before just asking questions because a lot of that information. Oh yes, thank you, Julie, for the Substack for Robert. Um, if for people who might be watching the recording, I'm sure if you just Google like Substack Robert Baxter, it'll come up. Um, yeah, he's like a really great resource. He's made so much information publicly available. That's something that's really great about Riso printing in general, similar to kind of like the zine community. It's a very open and inviting community. There's not a lot of like trade secrets type stuff. People in general tend to be pretty open with sharing information and helping people. It's very different from like say the letterpress community. Not to shove the letterpress community under the bus, but I've had very different experiences in that situation. Yes, Laura understands the letterpress shade. Um, I was just going to put up this Spectralight website. That's what I was going to do. So yeah, this website, I think we've already put it in the chat, but it's just spectralight.app. So you can see here, um, unfortunately, it is only for Macs. Um, um, and there's a little bit of more information here about like how to use it. The other thing about Spectralight, which I didn't mention, is there's a lot of tools in here that are not just for Riso. It's a really powerful application for other things. There are great templates in there for like creating zine, um, like zine booklet mode things, um, for like doing 8-page mini zines, like longer mini zines. You can upload PDFs and it will automatically make a printable file for you. It's kind of a very it's sort of buried in this more specifically Riso application, but there are a lot of different things that are not just specific to Riso, that are just specific to like printing in general, zine making in general. It's a very useful program. And yeah, there's tons of information on this website about how it works and how to use it. Um, does anyone else have any questions? I know that was kind of like a very sort of course overview. If people also are interested in the photography thing, I do the presentation the slides I gave today are as I said, are kind of cannibalized from a full presentation I gave about Riso for photography. So I'm happy to also provide those slides, which have a lot more information about that if people are interested in it. Um, it's much longer. It has a slightly different meme of the woman, of the math woman. Yes, I can. Laura says me. I can send them to you. Um, but yeah, does anyone have like any questions about anything? Feel free to go on mic also if you would like.
I just want to mention um, if you live in a major city, it's very possible that there's a printing lab in in your city that has risograph classes and risograph machines that you can sign up for maybe a membership to use. I know there's one in Columbus, there's one in New York City, definitely in other places, but I'm less familiar with those. But
Seattle as well.
Um, yeah, I know there's the Riso lab at SVA. They do distinct classes separate from the college, and then there's tons of resources around.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's
Mm.
yeah, I meant to mention that I was about to show it seems that the stencil wiki is down right now, so
Oh,
I guess
uh-oh.
I will send a message in the Discord to tell them that. But there is a great tool. Typically it is working. Um but there's a great tool on there called the Riso Atlas, where you can search either by like ink color or by location. Some of it will be printing labs, some of it will be just like presses. Like it could be people, anyone can register for it. They could just they have a Riso in their house and they can put it in there, but it'll say like what machine they have and what colors they have typically. Um, so you can like zoom into your area and see if there is anybody in your area. That's a great way to find that out. You can also obviously just Google like a lot of people come to me and I say like, how did you find me? And they tell me like I Googled Riso Rochester and this came up. So it's it's very that for sure. There's also some other places that do more online type Riso workshops. I know specifically for Riso animation, Kelly Anderson does a online workshop. Um, and there are other people, I think Lucky Risograph might do some online stuff. If you, same thing, if you just Google online risograph workshop, certainly things will pop up. Um, yes, thank you. Um, but there's lots of different places in terms of like, since it does seem to be the people here are kind of Western New York focused. Um, I mean, I do classes here at my studio. I'm not doing a ton of group classes right now, but I do independent things for people who are closer to me here in Rochester. Um, I don't believe the one in Buffalo, has a Riso. I don't think they do. But Flower City Arts Center, which is in Rochester, has a Riso. Syracuse University has a Riso, but that is not open to the public. There is an Ithaca Print Commons also has one that is available to the public. So for people, since this group has skewed very regionally relevant to me, those
So
are a couple of resources that I know of. Yeah, Laura, do you know of any others?
I was just gonna make it clear for Hannah and Julie that Winnie Back that you're referring to is Book Arts Center. They don't
Oh,
use
yes, sorry.
call themselves that anymore. So only
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
no, but I just know Julie's newer to town, so they might not have recognized that you were talking about a space they've been in. And no, they do not have Rizzo. And I don't know anybody in town that does.
I don't know. I know people, there's someone who I used to share studio with who used to live in Buffalo, and he has a Riso, but I that's obviously not helpful. That's just sort of a random anecdote at that point. Yeah, I don't believe there's any open source like spaces in Buffalo that you can use a Riso, but Rochester is only an hour away, so it's not super far. Um, and there might be. I mean, if it's definitely worth looking up. I feel like new things have, yeah, that Julie has said that there's nothing in Buffalo. Yeah, I don't think there is, but there is a lot. There's weirdly a lot in Rochester. Like besides me and the art center, we're the only ones really doing like open public facing programming, but there's like five other people who have their own machines who are just like printing in their houses. It's kind of weird that there's like this many people who do it in Rochester specifically. I feel like Rochester is very big about that, where there's like a lot big concentrations of people doing something really specific. And then Ithaca Print Commons is also doing really cool things. Um, but yeah, and then there are also other um, of those online resources that we've mentioned already. Um, yeah, in terms of like more robust online classes, if you are interested in the photography angle, I took Travis's class. I took actually the first iteration of it, and I learned like a phenomenal. Um, Obviously, it's a big ask to for something that is a little more expensive, but I would say in terms of places I've like learned information other than just talking to people in like the risograph Discord, that's definitely the place I've learned the most from anybody. Um, and you can just pay the lower rate to just get access to the information. Um, yeah, does anyone have any other questions before we wrap up?
It looks like Stencil Wiki may be down for a
Oh,
while.
that's what I was just saying. Yeah, I don't know why that is. But I will message. There's a channel in the Discord about Stencil Wiki.
I put it in there
Sorry?
while chatting, and issue press says he's doing something.
Oh, he's doing something about it. Okay.
Be a while. It didn't
Yeah.
sound.
Oh no. Yeah, the guy who runs Issue Press is the one who runs he's sort of the webmaster of Stencil Wiki. Um, but I'm sure it'll be back in somewhat quickly. Um, and regardless, a lot of that information is available in other places. It's mostly that the atlas is pretty helpful. So once it's back up, if you are looking for, I keep saying if you're looking for but everyone's right here. Um, so I guess if you're looking for things in your area, I guess just email me. 'Cause I'm probably the closest person to you. Um, or take the class at Flower City Art Center if you're looking for more of a group class. Quicker, just because I don't really have the capacity right now to be teaching like group in-person classes. Actually, my partner teaches the group classes. So if you do that, you should tell them that I sent you. Um, but yeah, does anyone? Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Julie. Well, I hope this was helpful. Sometimes I feel like I'm just kind of saying a lot of words, but okay, good. I'm glad it was helpful, Laura. Um, I yeah, I think that there's also other I can send over when I'm sending the slides. I have a playlist in terms of printing specifically and doing some color profile stuff. I do have a couple quick videos that I have made already, some pre-made videos that I can send. Um and I have a couple other like handout type things that I can send as well. Um yeah, well, okay. I think that if there's no other questions, we're about at time. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Evan. I think that risograph is an awesome tool for people to get into, so I really appreciate you taking the time to be here and share your knowledge with us. This recording will be up on YouTube tomorrow, probably,
Okay.
and I'll add some of the resources that were shared in the chat today into the video description. Let's see. We will be back next weekend for more live events. Check those out on our website, and come join us.
Oh, I'm just gonna put my email in the chat one more time in case anyone needs